So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. What pride, baby? Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. It is Super Bowl Sunday, and we are here to talk about the Lions, talk about the Super Bowl, and talk about all kinds of things related to the NFL. So, with that being said, we're going to start off with a little bit of Lions news and a few Detroit Lions rumors as people start to get in and as people start joining the live stream. First off, we're going to talk about Aubrey Pleasant, the defensive backs coach for the Detroit Lions. Now, Aubrey Pleasant has been one of the bigger coaching hires for the Detroit Lions in the past year and is a guy that has really helped the Detroit Lions when it comes to developing their young defensive backs, whether it be Jeff Okudah, whether it be Amani Oruwariye, Jerry Jacobs, Ifeatu Melifonwu, AJ Parker. He had a big influence in Will Harris's development this year and Tracy Walker. A lot of our young defensive backs saw their best seasons in the NFL due to the addition of both Aaron Glenn and Aubrey Pleasant, helping them both develop as defensive backs, as both of them are either current or former defensive backs coach. Now, Aubrey Pleasant is somebody that the Lions want to keep around for a long time. He is somebody that is in the Detroit Lions' long-term plans for the future to develop young defensive backs into an elite secondary for the Detroit Lions. But that may not be the case anymore, as Aubrey Pleasant, after his job at the Senior Bowl coaching as the defensive coordinator for the American side of the Senior Bowl practices and scrimmage, has gotten some interest from other NFL teams, whether it be Minnesota, New Orleans, or a couple other teams to show interest. Aubrey Pleasant has interviewed for multiple defensive coordinator positions. About a week or two ago, Aubrey Pleasant was interviewed for the defensive coordinator job with the Minnesota Vikings, and he did not get the job. Unfortunately enough for him, but fortunately enough for the Detroit Lions, Aubrey Pleasant did not accept the job, or did not take the job that was offered to him by the Minnesota Vikings for the defensive coordinator position. But as soon as that news broke, he had another interview in sight, as he was set to interview for the defensive coordinator job for the New Orleans Saints. Now, the New Orleans Saints obviously have a really big connection with the Detroit Lions, right? Dan Campbell came from the New Orleans Saints, Aaron Glenn came from the New Orleans Saints, and Alex Anzalone, our defensive captain, came from the New Orleans Saints. There's obviously that connection there between the Saints and the Lions with their coaches and with their players, and I think that Dan Campbell is a big part of why Aubrey Pleasant got this defensive coordinator job with the Saints, right? Or at least got the defensive coordinator interview with the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, Dan Campbell sees a lot in Aubrey Pleasant. Obviously, he sees a great coach in Aubrey Pleasant. And obviously, he wants Aubrey Pleasant to succeed in the NFL and to go farther and become that defensive coordinator, get that job promotion, and hopefully one day even get as far as he did, becoming the head coach of an NFL team. Now, Aubrey Pleasant has been said to interview very, very well with these jobs. They said that, in his job with the Minnesota Vikings, or with his interview with the Minnesota Vikings, he was really, really good. They said his vision for the future was really good with the Vikings, but they just ended up going in a different direction, hiring a different defensive coordinator, and it is unclear on how the defensive coordinator job for the New Orleans Saints went. There has been no announcement, has been no update regarding the interview with the New Orleans Saints, no update regarding whether or not Aubrey Pleasant is going to be the defensive coordinator of the future for the New Orleans Saints, right? They just promoted their former defensive coordinator to head coach after Sean Payton stepped away from coaching for a while, right? They, promoted Dennis Allen, the former defensive coordinator, and now have to fill that role. I don't want to see Aubrey Pleasant leave. Obviously, he is somebody that has been a really good coach for the Detroit Lions over the last year. He is somebody that helped a lot of our young defensive backs develop, and he's somebody that I think is going to have to help our young defensive backs develop for the future. He's somebody that, just seems to get the most out of his players throughout the season. He obviously dealt with a lot of injuries, right? Jeff Okuda went down, Amani Oruwariye went down, A.J. Parker went down, Ifeatu Melifonwu left with injury, Jerry Jacobs left with injury about halfway through the season. I mean, he was down to his sixth and seventh cornerback. He was down to coaching Will Harris to be a boundary side cornerback for the Detroit Lions after never playing that position in his entire collegiate or professional career. And yet, he got some of the best performances of Will Harris's career when he put him at cornerback. He got, some of the career best performances out of undrafted free agents and out of, late round picks and out of waiver wire pickups and practice squad players. He got the best performance out of that while his secondary was a revolving door week in and week out. And I think that is why he got that interview. I think his ability to coach through controversy, I think his ability to just get the most out of each player in his secondary is a big reason why he got these interviews. And obviously, he did a very good job at the Senior Bowl, was the defensive coordinator there for the American side, and coached a really good game, called a good game defensively, ran super competitive practices. The players seemed to like and respond to him. And I think Aubrey Pleasant is going to be a really good defensive coordinator when his time comes, whether that be this season, whether that be next season, or whether it's a few more seasons down the road. I really, really think that Aubrey Pleasant is going to one day get an offensive or a defensive coordinator job in the NFL. And I think whatever team is lucky enough to hire him, whatever team is lucky enough to, take that chance on a first-time defensive coordinator, somebody that's never done it before, but somebody that just has a lot of upside and somebody that just, if he works out, he can be one of the better defensive coordinators in the NFL. And I think that, for me as a Lions fan and for Lions fans in general, I think a lot of us are going to say we don't want him to go, obviously. But Aubrey Pleasant could be on the move and could be heading out to New Orleans to get that defensive coordinator position. Now, there are a couple of rumors coming out as well. Obviously, there's free agency approaching. There's going to be players coming out, and there's going to be rumors of like so-and-so is going here, so-and-so is going there, and we will get to that in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, I want to also talk about one more coaching change. Now, Ben Johnson, the former quality control coach, formerly the pass game coordinator, and formerly the tight ends coach for the Detroit Lions, has been promoted to offensive coordinator. Now, Ben Johnson, we've talked about before, right? He's got a long history in the NFL of one playing quarterback at the collegiate level. Then after that, he was an assistant coach at the collegiate level. Then he was a quarterback's coach, a wide receivers coach, a tight ends coach, a qualities control coach, an offensive assistants. You got pass game coordinators, all these different things. And now he's getting an opportunity to be the offensive coordinator. Now, this is somebody that a lot of Lions fans are really, really excited about. And I think this is a coach that is the perfect hire for the Detroit Lions. Ben Johnson is a homegrown talent. He's been in Detroit for a couple of years now. He is a guy that was brought in, and Dan Campbell has developed. Dan Campbell has taken this qualities control coach to offensive pass game coordinator, to offensive coordinator. He's a guy that, the Bengals tried to hire as an offensive assistant or an offensive play caller many times. Zach Taylor said it himself in an interview that he wanted Ben Johnson time and time and time again, but he could never land that interview or never land that hire because the Lions just kept promoting him and the Lions just kept giving him more responsibilities and blocking the interview process also that they could sign Ben Johnson to a bigger contract with a more responsibility-filled role. Now, Ben Johnson being the offensive coordinator, I think says a lot about the Detroit Lions, and I think it reveals their hand a little bit about the NFL draft. Obviously, when working at the Senior Bowl, Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He called the plays, he worked with the quarterbacks, he worked with the offense, and again, a lot like Aubrey Pleasant, ran very, very competitive practices and got a great response out of his players. Now, Fernando is the first one to comment today, says, when is the Kayvon Thibodeau scout video coming out? I don't know. I'm working on it. I've watched a game or two, about a game and a half so far. I'm going to watch probably two more games because I want to get a real good in-depth view of Kayvon Thibodeau. And I really want to compare the two between Hutchinson and Thibodeau. But that will be out within the week, I'll say at the very least. But I'm not sure exactly what day because there's a couple of videos I do want to work on before that. But speaking of Ben Johnson, right, he worked really closely with Malik Willis all week long at the Senior Bowl. And I think that they are going to draft Malik Willis because he has that familiarity with Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson, being the new offensive coordinator, he's going to go in during the draft. He's going to get in that meeting and he's going to say, we need this guy at quarterback, right? I worked with him for a week. We worked with him at the Senior Bowl. He's got all these physical tools, the arm strength, the release, the athleticism, you name the skill, you name the trait, and Malik Willis probably has it. We need this guy. Not to mention, in just a week under Ben Johnson, Malik Willis improved a lot as far as reading the game, getting to his third, fourth, and fifth reads on the play. He improved a lot from the mental side of the football game, and that is where Malik Willis needed the most improvement, in my opinion, was that mental side of the game, was that, reading the football field, seeing, different coverages, seeing post-snap motion, seeing, all these different, more complicated systems and schemes is where Malik Willis really started to struggle, right? You saw it against Ole Miss where he threw a couple interceptions. You saw it against, I believe, Syracuse where, he didn't have a horrible game, but didn't have the biggest game of his career, right? You saw it with these bigger, ACC, SEC kind of players and SEC and ACC kind of teams where Malik Willis, when the talent got a little better, when the coaching got significantly better, and when things got a little bit more complicated and you couldn't rely on your first read and you can't always rely on your athleticism, that's where Malik Willis began to struggle a little bit. But in a couple days against some of the best players that college football had to offer, right? Obviously, you have all the quarterbacks there, but he was testing Kobe Bryant in coverage. He was testing, the New York Jets coaching staff, NFL coaching staff. He looked really good. He made several reads. He got to his third and fourth read on almost every play that required it. And he showed his ability to, make that quick decision of, okay, my guy's not here. I'm going to go, right? I have this athleticism. I have this ability. If my third and fourth reads aren't there, instead of taking a 5-yard check down, I can run for 10, 15 yards. He had the ability to process that as well and take off and go for a big run in a big game. And obviously, you saw that a couple times where, Malik Willis only attempted 4 passes, but it's not because he was afraid to pass. It's because, the defense for the national team and the national side of the Senior Bowl had really good coverage and really good coaching. And Malik Willis was able to understand that, recognize that, and take exactly what the defense is giving him without forcing that deep shot, without forcing to be that, superhero, without forcing himself to play hero ball, which really, really plagued him at the University of Liberty. Now, Fernando says it would be nice if we drafted Willis under the coaching staff. He could develop to be a beast. I 100% agree. And I really think Malik Willis is going to be a pick for the Detroit Lions in the 2021 draft or 2022 draft. And I have a mock draft pulled up. It's on my other screen right here. And we are going to get to it in a little bit after we get done with these rumors. But I think the Lions trade up in the first round. I think they trade up to the mid to late teens. And I think they draft Malik Willis before the Steelers have an opportunity to take him. And I think that he falls a little bit, not because of his talent, but because a lot of teams aren't going to take a quarterback, in my opinion, right? The Jags won't take a quarterback. The Jets won't take a quarterback. The Texans won't take a quarterback. I don't think any quarterback goes top 5. The Panthers might take a quarterback, but I don't think, from everything I've heard, it's either going to be Malik Willis, or not Malik Willis. It's either going to be Matt Corral or Kenny Pickett for the Carolina Panthers. That just seems to be the guy that they are more interested in. The Giants, I don't think, take a quarterback. The Falcons, I don't think, take a quarterback. The Broncos, I don't think, take a quarterback. The Jets, again, not taking a quarterback because they just drafted their guy at 2 a year ago. Washington could, but I think Taylor Heinicke showed enough to the point where, he is serviceable for another year. And I think that Washington had enough problems last year and a big enough step back where Taylor Heinicke was not the biggest problem. The Vikings won't take a quarterback. The Browns, I don't think, take a quarterback. The Ravens aren't taking a quarterback in the first round. The Eagles are not taking a quarterback, and the Chargers are not taking a quarterback. I think the Saints is probably the natural point where you need to trade up, right? It jumps the Steelers at 20. You're kind of past all the guys that don't really need a quarterback for the future, right? Whereas you get to the later rounds, right? The Steelers could take a quarterback, the Raiders could take a quarterback, the Titans could maybe take a quarterback, the Bucks definitely could take a quarterback, Miami might take a quarterback, and again, the Saints as well down there at 19. But, you get to that point and those guys might take a quarterback. So you trade in front of all of those guys from 32. You give up a decent amount of capital, but not, obviously you don't give up too much to move up in that spot. And I think they take Malik Willis with the 18th overall pick, trading with the New Orleans Saints, again, taking advantage of that relationship that they have with that Saints organization. And I mean, at the same time, still giving them a really good deal, but getting their guy in the process. So with that being said, I think Ben Johnson solidifies that Malik Willis pick. I think it really solidifies the fact that they want Malik Willis, but not only do they want the talent, they want somebody that he's worked with before, and they want somebody that they know he can develop under. So I think that pick right there is probably not a guaranteed pick, obviously, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that if Malik Willis falls anywhere past 15, you're going to see the Lions making a pretty solid effort to move up in the draft to go and get him. Now, I have two NFL rumors that have come out over the past week or so about players the Lions could potentially be looking to target in free agency. And the Lions, obviously, some of their biggest needs in this draft class or in this free agency class is wide receiver and safety. Their safety position is incredibly thin, and their wide receiver position is not very talented. It's deep, right? You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have Josh Reynolds, you have you have what's his name? You have Quintez Cephas, you have some guys, right? They're not the biggest name guys, but they're guys that can get the job done. But I think the Lions still need that alpha number one wide receiver to go get, and I think they should draft at least one, if not two wide receivers in the draft. But from what I've seen over the past week, it seems as though Allen Robinson will be an unrestricted free agent when the free agency market officially opens. And it is said that he is a favorite to go to the Detroit Lions. And it makes a lot of sense. He grew up in Michigan, grew up in Detroit, right? Didn't go to school in Michigan, didn't go to a Michigan school, but grew up here, was a Lions fan growing up, could look to come back home. It's a good fit for the Lions. It could be a good fit for Allen Robinson, right? It's a team that if he sees the potential of what the Lions are building or what they're trying to build, it could be enticing. And the Lions have a decent amount of money to go out and get a wide receiver for a contract that is probably going to be the cheapest contract that you're going to find Allen Robinson at. Allen Robinson, coming off a little bit of a down year, could be, a little bit down in value on the free agency market, which could allow the Lions to move in, pay him a decent amount of money, and have him come in and try to revitalize what was at one point a really, really encouraging career. And it's not like he's been bad for a long time. He had one down season with a team that he did not want to play for. Right? So, it's a fit for Malik, or it's a fit for Allen Robinson. It's a fit for Detroit, and I think it could be a really, really good pickup. Now, another player and the other rumor that I saw floating around was that Jabril Peppers will likely as well become an unrestricted free agent, and one of the teams that is likely to show interest in him is the Detroit Lions. Now, we've talked about Jabril Peppers before. Again, a former Michigan guy, played at the University of Michigan, was a Heisman candidate, dark horse Heisman candidate, but still Heisman candidate at the linebacker, safety, defensive end position, slot cornerback position, and is a guy that played in Michigan, is a guy that is super talented and very, very versatile, a player at a position of need for a Lions secondary that at the safety position isn't incredibly deep. Positional-wise, it makes sense for the Lions. They have the money to pay him. He's versatile, so we can play that linebacker, slot cornerback, or safety role for the Detroit Lions, can move around, be that utility tool for the Lions defense. It makes a lot of sense for both sides, right? It makes sense from Jabril Peppers' side of it. It makes sense from the Detroit Lions side of it. And all in all, I think that that is probably the best fit for the Detroit Lions this season. Now, 20 minutes in, we're going to get to the mock draft. I went through the mock draft on a different format this time. I didn't want to use PFN because it was a little bit unrealistic. The trades weren't great. It wasn't all that realistic. They had players rated really weirdly. They had players at some weird positions. And just overall, it started to get very, very outdated. And the trade logic wasn't really all that well. So I found a different one. It's the NFL mock draft database. This one seems to be really precise. This one seems to have some really good rankings that I agree with. The trades are very fair. It's actually hard and difficult to trade in this scenario and in this mock draft, which I think is good because you don't want to have too many, big trades, right? You're not, or realistically, you're not going to get 2 top 10 picks from the Jets for the number 2 overall pick. But this one seems to be a lot more realistic. So Ghost Gunner says, I can never get PFN to work. It's just a weird one because I feel like they put it together at the beginning and then don't really update it. And then Tony Holly says, I would build up the defense first in the draft. They look for wide receiver and free agency. I think defensive line first, safety or linebacker. And that's exactly what we're going to get into today. But I'm going to start off and I'm going to open with the trades, as there were a couple of trades made in this. And it's just at the top here. So I am just going to share. Now, the first trade that I made was at the number 2 overall pick. Aiden Hutchinson went number 1 overall and was the number 1 player in the NFL draft. And with the number 2 overall pick, with a couple of guys sitting there that I was really, really confident in, trading down 2 spots seemed like a good idea. It seemed like something that, right, you're pretty much guaranteed one of your players, because I don't think the Texans take a pass rusher or a safety. I think they take an offensive lineman. So at that point, you're almost guaranteed either Kayvon Thibodeaux or Kyle Hamilton. So I traded the number 2 overall pick to the Jets for the number 4 overall pick, the number 35 overall pick, and the number 69 overall pick. These 3, I think, are really good value for the number 3. You're probably not going to get 2 firsts out of it unless it's a future first-round pick. I think 3 top 100 picks for number 2 for a team to move up just 2 spots in this draft class is pretty reasonable, and I thought it just made a lot of sense. And then after we made that pick, we moved down. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with the New Orleans Saints, you give up the 32 pick, the 66th pick, and the 97th pick, 3 top 100 picks to move up several spots. Obviously, pick 18 is slightly less valuable than pick number 2, but you give up those you give up 3 top 100 picks, 3 picks from 32 to 97 to move up a decent amount in the NFL draft. What is that? 14 spots in the NFL draft. And you pick up a pick just outside the top 100, which is not bad value. So move up to number 18. Now, you can probably guess who the number 1 pick was, and it was Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton is somebody that I think is the best player in the draft. He is big. He's 6'4", 220 pounds, has all the range you could ever ask for in a safety, has all the physical tools, has long arms, gets passes defended. Gets his hand on the football to catch it or to break up passes. And some of the plays that he makes in the Notre Dame secondary is just flat out not something that a player should be able to do, right? He is just simply the best player in the class. He is arguably the highest ceiling in the class while having a relatively high floor. He covers 70% of the football field when he's playing, which is kind of ridiculous. He is just a physical specimen for the wide receiver or for the safety position. He's a generational talent. He is, for lack of a better term, this is kind of the term that everybody seems to be using. He is a unicorn prospect at safety, meaning it's something we have never, ever seen before. And at the number 4 overall pick, with Aiden Hutchinson being off the board and Kayvon Thibodeaux going at number 2, it was the obvious choice to take Kyle Hamilton. And I'm not upset. I think that Kyle Hamilton's the best overall pick. I would have taken him at number 4, but I also wanted to accumulate a couple of other picks so that I can make and maneuver up to the number 18 pick for Malik Willis. And Malik Willis is exactly who we drafted at number 18. This trade for me makes a lot of sense because you have the New Orleans Saints connection. You have that connection from Dan Campbell to the Saints, Aaron Glenn to the Saints, in the same way that Kyle Hamilton makes a lot of sense because of Aubrey Pleasant and because of Aaron Glenn being defensive back coaches that can obviously coach up this young, talented player. Malik Willis makes sense for the offensive side of the ball because Ben Johnson is the OC, because he's worked with Ben Johnson before, and he has all these physical tools to be an MVP caliber quarterback in the future. The number 18 overall pick seemed like the right pick for the Detroit Lions. He is somebody that, I mean, if all things go right, if he develops properly, can be an all-pro, can be a Hall of Fame type of quarterback. Can be that next Patrick Mahomes, can be that next Josh Allen. He has the arm, he has the athleticism. He's more athletic than Mahomes and Allen. He's got a pretty close arm to both of them. He's got a really quick release. He's got just all these physical gifts. And if Ben Johnson in a week can teach Malik Willis from going from a 1-read quarterback to a 3 to 4 read quarterback, what's he going to do in an offseason? What's he going to do in a full season with Malik Willis on the bench? I think the ceiling is unlimited with Malik Willis and Ben Johnson. They seem to mesh well together. They seem to work well together and build off of ideas together. And again, if Ben Johnson can get that much development out of a young quarterback that's a 1-read guy from college, if he can get him to 2, 3 reads in a week, what's he going to do throughout an offseason? What's he going to do throughout a training camp where he sees him every single day? What's he going to do with a full season to learn behind a veteran starting quarterback like Jared Goff? If Malik Willis is willing to learn and sit for a year, he's going to be the perfect pick at the number 18 overall spot. Now, this was the last pick in the first round, and I want to go through the first round just a little bit. Just kind of go through who was where and who did what. Fernando says, great pick, Kyle Hamilton. Again, I think he's the perfect pick. Now, Aiden Hutchinson went number 1. I traded down to the number 4 position, and actually the Jets took an offensive lineman to protect their franchise guy in Zach Wilson, right? They took an offensive lineman in the first round a year ago. They took, I believe, Elijah Vera Tucker with mid-first round pick, and they trade up again for Evan Neal. Evan Neal, probably the best tackle in this class when it comes to pass protection. He's a good run blocker as well, but his strength is in pass protection, and overall, this makes a lot of sense. I could see Kayvon Thibodeau going here. It makes a lot of sense there as well, is obviously your head coach, Robert Saleh, is a former defensive coordinator from the San Francisco 49ers, and those San Francisco 49ers, under the guidance of I just said his name, under Robert Saleh, took a defensive lineman in the first round 4 years in a row, and 2 of those guys, in Solomon Thomas and in Nick Bosa, were top 3 picks. So it makes sense that he might move up and try to follow that 49ers scheme. Robert Saleh may look to follow in his 49ers roots and take Kayvon Thibodeau at 2, being the last big edge rusher, I guess elite edge rushing prospect for this draft. But they decide to pick up Evan Neal at the offensive tackle, and then the Texans, in a very predictable move, go offensive tackle as well. They protect Davis Mills or Deshaun Watson if Deshaun Watson comes back next season, right? They have a lot of needs, but the biggest need when you're starting your franchise is to protect your passer, is to protect your quarterback, and there's no quarterback warranting a number 3 overall pick in this class. So you take your offensive tackle, you get probably and arguably the best offensive tackle in this class, at the very least the best run blocking offensive tackle in this class, and you secure your offensive line. You get an elite tackle duo with Laramie Tunsil and with Ikem Ekwonu, I think is how you say his name. You get that elite tackle duo. You have Brandon Cooks there, who's pretty good. You have, they have a couple good secondary players. They have a couple good young defensive players as well. And, you build up through this draft, you get some offensive talent, and you start with another franchise tackle. And I think that's the smart move there. Now, Kyle Hamilton and Kayvon Thibodeau were both on the board at this point, but in my opinion, Kyle Hamilton just has fewer red flags and has more impact immediately for the Detroit Lions than I think Kayvon will. He doesn't have the injury concerns that Kayvon Thibodeau has, and again, he is the best player in this draft class. Now, Charles Cross went at 5. Again, protect your franchise guy and Daniel Jones. Kenny Pickett went at 6 to the Carolina Panthers, looking to move on from the Sam Darnold experiment. George Karlaftis, the next pass rusher, goes at number 7. Now, I don't know why they'd take Purdue's George Karlaftis over Oregon's Kayvon Thibodeau, but again, probably due to scheme fit and due to what they want. Kayvon's more of a run stopper. George Karlaftis is more of a well-rounded, high-floor kind of guy. David Ajabo goes at 10, or goes at 9. Very Denver Broncos-esque move, right? You go from Von Miller to Bradley Chubb. You go from Bradley Chubb to David Ajabo. It's kind of following that Broncos formula that won them Super Bowl 50, and that has led them to have a top-tier edge rusher for almost or over a decade at this point. Now, Ahmad Gardner goes at number 10, the best cornerback in the class at this point. I mean, over 1,000 coverage snaps and 0 touchdowns allowed. Had almost a flawless career at the University of Cincinnati. Garrett Wilson, a lot of sense is made there, picking at number 11. Nakobe Dean, upgrading that aging linebacking core in Minnesota makes a lot of sense. Giving Baker Mayfield another weapon in the absence of Odell Beckham Jr. makes a lot of sense. A big physical guy that can go up and get the football and has some yak ability. Tyler Lindenbaum, the offensive lineman from Iowa, makes a lot of sense to Baltimore. Again, you protect Lamar Jackson. He has, Lamar Jackson is that guy that'll scramble, will move around, will get your offense on track if he's protected, but he can't do that if he's on the ground. The Ravens had trouble with protection a year ago. The Philadelphia Eagles, holding 3 picks in this draft, go back-to-back with Derek Stingley, upgrading that secondary alongside with Darius Slay. Then they go back to Alabama for another wide receiver in Jameson Williams. I think 2 really good picks. Drake London is the pick at 17, wide receiver from USC. Makes a ton of sense for the Los Angeles Chargers. Maybe they go offensive line yet again, but with all the top tackles coming off the board already, it makes a lot of sense for them to upgrade at wide receiver, get another dominant boundary guy alongside Keenan Allen, and just give Justin Herbert as many weapons as possible to play his best football. Malik Willis again at 18. I think just the best pick available. Devin Lloyd goes at 19. The Eagles, with their 3rd pick, upgrade at the linebacker position. Matt Corral is somebody that could go higher. I think he falls a little bit due to his ankle injury in the bowl game. Obviously, they said that it wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't anything that was going to, keep him out of the first round necessarily, but it could be something that affects his draft status slightly. We're going to go see him in the senior, or we're going to go see him in the combine and see how he runs and how he throws and see if he's healed yet. But I think that ankle injury does drop him a little bit, but not to the point where the Steelers, with a retired Big Ben and with their only quarterback options being Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph, I don't think they pass on Matt Corral. With that, the Patriots get Andrew Booth Jr., a dominant cornerback, right? Replace Stephon Gilmore in the Patriots' best seasons. They've had those top-tier cornerbacks, those Darrelle Revises, those, Stephon Gilmores, those Aqib Talibs. They've had an elite cornerback on almost all of their Super Bowl teams, and Andrew Booth Jr. can be that next elite cornerback. Jordan Davis goes with the number 22 pick to the Oakland Raiders. I think they need help on that defensive line. They have, Max Crosby is really good. They put a high draft stock into Clelin Ferrell. They need some interior pass rush. They need some interior guys, and they're going to go with Jordan Davis, a guy that for the Georgia Bulldogs was arguably more impactful than anybody else in the entire draft class, but has some struggle staying on the field. Jeremiah Johnson, a really productive pass rusher last year for Florida State, goes to the Arizona Cardinals. I think that makes sense as well, right? You get some pass rush. J.J. Watt didn't play a lot last year. Chandler Jones is getting older. You have 2 really good defensive ends, but they're aging really, really quickly, and they're going to retire sooner than you might think. DeMarvin Leal is the pick at number 24. Again, is just a good pickup for the Dallas defense. Adds some more talent to that defensive line. Chris Olave to the Bills. It's being rumored that Emmanuel Sanders is looking to retire this season. He hasn't officially made the statement, but he has said that he's definitely contemplating it, and it's being rumored that he will. So Chris Olave paired with Stephon Diggs, with Josh Allen throwing him the ball, is a scary thing to think about. Jahan Dotson, wide receiver from Penn State, goes at 26. He is somebody that, again, is probably going to go either late in the first round or very early in the second round. You pair him with A.J. Brown and, you give Ryan Tannehill the weapons of Derrick Henry and Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and Jahan Dotson. You're going to have a really good explosive offense. And if Ryan Tannehill doesn't throw interceptions, that's going to be a really hard team to beat. Trent McDuffie to the Buccaneers makes a lot of sense. There isn't really a quarterback at this point taken off the board that makes sense here, right? You obviously, Matt Corral is gone, Malik Willis is gone, and Kenny Pickett are all gone. There's a couple of guys you can get probably third, fourth round for really good value if you're the Buccaneers, or if you have trust in Kyle Trask, he can also be a guy that's already on your roster that you don't have to spend more capital on. But Trent McDuffie, right, you upgrade that cornerback position. The Rams absolutely abused the Buccaneers secondary both times last year, and you get Trent McDuffie. Hopefully you try to cover your Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. next time. You upgrade that secondary that struggled in the playoffs, and really at this point in the NFC, you were building to beat the Rams, and you beat the Rams by holding Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham Jr. to very minimal gains. On Trayvon Walker, the edge rusher out of Georgia, makes a lot of sense. Again, they're not going to take a quarterback. They already had Jordan Love. Trayvon Walker, they didn't have a lot of edge rush last year with the Smith brothers suffering through injuries, so I think Trayvon Walker makes sense here. The offensive line for Miami, again, more of the same, protecting Tua. That offensive line was arguably the worst offensive line in football a year ago, and it is just that pick makes a lot of sense. Kenyon Green, a really good offensive lineman from Texas A&M. Khair Alim, the cornerback from Florida. Again, the Chiefs lost because Jamar Chase was the best player on the field. If you can't stop Jamar Chase, you can't win the AFC. Therefore, cornerback, and probably the best cornerback available, goes here. Roger McCreary, cornerback out of Auburn, goes at 31. Eli Apple's not very good. And this is probably the best cornerback they're going to get. And then the Saints actually take Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle from Northern Iowa, with the 32nd overall pick to upgrade that offensive line. Teron Armstead is getting a lot older. He still has a couple good years left, I would assume, but he is getting older on the offensive side of the ball, and he could be looking to move on very quickly. Alec G says, what are the chances we go defensive end and linebacker with our first two picks? Probably high. I wouldn't be shocked if defensive end goes at number 2, and I wouldn't be shocked. I'd say linebacker with our second pick is less likely because I don't think there's going to be a great linebacking prospect at 32. And if you're trading up in the NFL draft, I think you trade up for your franchise quarterback more so than your franchise linebacker, because I think this linebacker class is pretty deep as well. So that was the first round. We'll go back up to the actual Lions draft, and we will take it from here. So with the 34th overall pick, after picking up your franchise safety and your franchise quarterback, the Lions have back-to-back picks at 34 and 35. And with the 34th overall pick, I selected Logan Hall, the defensive lineman from Houston. He is like 6'6" and reminds me a lot of Ed Oliver coming out. He is not as good as Ed Oliver is or was coming out of the University of Houston, not quite as dominant, not a top 10 pick, but he is somebody that was really productive at the defensive line position, is somebody that got pressure, both had a lot of tackles for loss, a lot of sacks, had a ton of production, has good size and strength and athleticism. That he seems like another pick that Brad Holmes would make. Brad Holmes invested heavily in the defensive line in the second round last year even. And I think Logan Hall fits that mantra of what Brad Holmes wants to build, right? The defensive line wasn't great last year, especially in the run-stopping department, and the interior of our line wasn't great pass rushing. Logan Hall helps with both and can replace Michael Brockers when Michael Brockers does eventually retire. I think that pick just makes a lot of sense there. Joey Two Times says, what up, though? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. Logan Hall is the 34th overall pick, and then with the Lions' actual pick, they pick at 35, and I have them selecting – oh, that was a little spoiler. And I have them at 35 selecting Arnold Ebiketie, edge rusher from Penn State, had, I believe, 11 sacks and a bunch of tackles for loss a season ago, is really big, really athletic in a very similar way that a lot of Penn State edge rushers can be. Penn State just produced the Defensive Rookie of the Year, and this guy is bigger and more productive in college than Micah Parsons was when it comes to pass rushing and sacks. Penn State over the past couple years has had the ability to send edge rushers to the class. Think of Yetur Gross-Matos, obviously Micah Parsons last year, and I think Arnold Ipiketti can be the next player in that Penn State dynasty to come out and have production and produce at the NFL level. You still get a top quality edge rusher in this class while still getting your quarterback and safety in the first round. Upgrade your defensive line twice in 2 picks back-to-back to top off or to start the second round. And right now, this draft class, I think all 4 of these guys start. Maybe not Malik Willis, but I think all 4 of these guys are long-term starters for the Detroit Lions, as they should be, being top 35 picks. And then we waited for a bit, and we got our wide receiver 1. Justin Ross was there. He is projected to go around mid-70s, early 80s in the NFL draft, but after the 69th overall pick with the trade with the New Orleans Saints, we don't have a pick again until 91, and Justin Ross was going to be long gone by then. He's a really good player, is coming back, and is still, I think, coming back a little bit from injury, and when he had that really severe injury at Clemson. But he looked really, really good at Clemson. Didn't have the greatest quarterback play, but when he had Trevor Lawrence, he looked really good. And I think Justin Ross is a super talented wide receiver. At one point was talked about as a first-round pick and is now a early third-round pick for the Detroit Lions. He is your wide receiver of the future. He is that guy that is a little bit bigger, is more of a traditional X wide receiver that you can put on the boundary. Amon-Ra St. Brown can move between the slot and the Z. And he can just, those 2 wide receivers, I think, can make a lot of plays. And obviously, you put Josh Reynolds on the other boundary when Amon-Ra is in the slot. That's a pretty good wide receiver starting trio. You had Allen Robinson. That's another one. And then Quintez Cephas as your 4 or 5. That's a pretty good wide receiver. He says Justin Ross had a spinal injury, but it seems like it's not serious. It was really serious when it happened, but he seems like he's made a pretty full recovery, and it seems like he is playing some of his best football. Now, I just want to check. I didn't look at the stats all that much. Last year only had 46 receptions for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. Didn't have the greatest quarterback play, but in his freshman season had 46 receptions for 1,000 yards. In his sophomore season, 66 for 865 and 8 touchdowns. He is a great player. I don't think he was fully healed this season, or at least wasn't fully healthy until late in the year. He's getting back to that point where he can be a dominant wide receiver on the boundary, standing at 6'4", 205 pounds. Again, can kind of join that timeline of great Clemson wide receivers to come out and be productive in the NFL. He can be, your future wide receiver 1. And I think he can be a wide receiver 1 for a very long time. After that, we have Charlie Kolar at 118 even. Not picking at 91, picking at 118 because we gave up the 91st overall pick to move up as well. Charlie Kolar was the best player on the board. It was between running back or it was between tight end at this point. There was really only that talent at the top. Right, the top of the draft consisted of some running backs like Brian Robinson from Alabama, a BYU running back, a couple tight ends. But Charlie Kolar was somebody that stuck out to me. Somebody that, at Iowa State was really, really productive in his freshman year at 11 receptions for 137 and 3 touchdowns, averaging 12.5 yards per reception. And then his sophomore year, he really exploded, having 697 yards and 7 touchdowns. Slight step back in 2020 in his junior year with 44 receptions for 590 yards and 7 touchdowns. But then last year had 62 receptions, a career high for 750 yards, career high, and 6 more touchdowns. He's a really good receiving threat, stands at 6'6", 260 pounds. He could be a really good receiving threat for the Detroit Lions. And I know Brock Wright's still very good, but you can never have too much tight end depth, especially when it comes to injuries. Justin Ross would be an excellent consolation prize if we miss on a few other more popular guys. I don't even look at it as a consolation prize, but when you look at it, right, this was the point, I believe, where and I'll go through just to look at some of the wide receivers that were gone. But I know that David Bell came off the board at 43. I know that George Pickens went off the board at 54. That was my big target, but he went a little bit before we were able to move up and get him. You have, Jalen Tolbert off the board at 66. And Justin Ross was the best wide receiver available, bar none. I mean, he was the best guy available. And I don't even think of it as a consolation prize because you're still getting a really, really good player. Now, would I prefer some other guys? Sure. Would I prefer to have George Pickens? Yeah. But Justin Ross is a really, really good player. Now, moving on from 118, Tyree Johnson, the edge rusher from Texas A&M, was on the board. Now, he is somebody that was productive at Texas A&M, wasn't game-breaking, didn't do anything over the top or crazy, but was just a really productive edge rusher for a top team in the country over the past couple of years. It is somebody that I felt like it would be a good idea to pick up. He's edge rushing depth, right? Austin Bryant, you might want to move on from. You might want to move on from Julian Okwara in a couple of years if he doesn't start producing at a high level. And with all of the injuries that we sustained at the edge position, Tyree Johnson can absolutely step in and be an Austin Bryant, can step in and be a Julian Okwara. He's somebody that can step in and be productive when Romeo Okwara gets hurt, when Charles Harris gets hurt, when Trey Flowers gets hurt, when, Arnold Ebiketie gets hurt. He's just going to be good depth. If nothing else, you stash him on the practice squad for a couple of years and you get a young player. Now, Myron Cunningham, the offensive tackle, was the next pick, just 3 picks later at pick 179. Myron Cunningham is a 4-year starter with the University of Arkansas. He played every single position from left to right tackle across the board at some point in his 4 years starting with the Razorbacks. He is somebody that I believe only allowed 2 sacks and a 5 to 6 pressures, something in there, but really low pressure numbers, even lower sack numbers, is versatile enough to play across the entire offensive line, is a really powerful run blocker, and just overall is really good at a lot of different things. He isn't the greatest pass protector, not that he's bad at it, but I mean, he is much better as a run blocker, and he's much better as a run blocker. He is super, super versatile. And I think him backing up our offensive tackles, I mean, you have him step in, maybe even have him sub in as that 6th offensive lineman, that first tight end on running plays. It's kind of like you had Matt Nelson doing a year ago. Myron Cunningham is much more explosive, much more athletic, and much more powerful than Matt Nelson. And I think you sub him in as that 6th offensive line or that first tight end on the end of the line, and you could get a really, really powerful running game going very early in the 2022 season. And the Lions double up at offensive line, going with Nick Ford. He's a 3-time All Pac-12 player, a 3-time All Pac-12 and first-team All Pac-12 player. He is somebody that has just played a lot of games, has played very fluidly, has played very clean for many, many years, and just can add some offensive line depth. Dan Campbell at the Senior Bowl said he wanted to add that depth. He said he wanted some offensive linemen. He wanted to add depth everywhere, especially on the offensive line, is one place that he specified in particular. And they double up here at 179 and 217. Guys that aren't going to start for this Lions offensive line that at their peak can be a top 10, top 5 line in the NFL, but they get some young guys. They get some athletic run blockers and pass blockers, guys that are versatile, guys that can move around, and guys that just overall are going to compete and push these depth players for more competition. And then at 230, I guess these are the last 2 picks. At 231, Tyler Goodson, a running back from Iowa, a Big Ten running back that got a lot of carries, has proven that he can be a bell cow for a run-heavy system in a league and in a conference that is very hard to run against. Tyler Goodson is just going to be a depth running back. He's just going to be somebody that competes with Jermar Jefferson for that last running back spot. He might not win it. He might be a guy you stash on the practice squad. He might be a guy that, you have just in case of depth, right? Obviously, last year we lost DeAndre Swift for a while. We lost Jamal Williams for a while, and Craig Reynolds had to step up and be big in some games, right? If that happens again, you have Tyler Goodson stashed away on your your practice squad, and he's a guy that you can bring up in the preseason, a guy that, might have a couple good runs in the preseason, warrant a roster spot, or just be somebody that is there to push Jamar Jefferson for competition. I think that Brad Holmes is somebody that really likes his running backs. He's going to be that, that GM that keeps taking a running back late in the rounds until somebody hits. And I think Tyler Goodson can be that guy that hits. And then the last guy I wanted to look at was Damari Mathis, the cornerback out of Pittsburgh. Not a lot of options left with this one, but Damari Mathis is somebody that played 5 years in the ACC, 5 years at a Power 5 school at the University of Pittsburgh, came away with 5 interceptions, came away with 18 passes defended, and came away with, just a really overall solid career with the Pittsburgh Panthers. So this was the mock draft that I was able to put together. Let me get rid of this so you can see. Damari Mathis is the very, very last player in this draft class. I really like it. You get your safety one for a long time, that generational talent that is just hard to pass on, right? If you think of this draft, it's going to be a hard argument for you to pass on Kyle Hamilton. Malik Willis, your quarterback of the future, is going to sit for a year, but is also going to be a really big-time contributor for many, many years in 2023 and beyond. Logan Hall, a really productive defensive lineman, starts for this team. Arnold Ibiketti either starts or rotates with Charles Harris a ton in his rookie season. Justin Ross probably comes in as our wide receiver 4, depending on free agency, but is a long-term solution at the X wide receiver position. You get a second-string tight end that is really productive in the receiving game. You get another rotational edge player for arguably replacing an injury-prone Austin Bryant. You get 2 really good two really good offensive linemen that are going to be depth guys and that can just, obviously secure the depth part of your offensive line for a long time. Then you get a running back and a cornerback that are going to push everybody else on the bubble to be better. And the best player to come out of those competitions is going to be so much better for it. Now, that is the mock draft that I put together. Again, first round, Aiden Hutchinson went first, and then you got some offensive linemen. This was the best pick at the time. I think with the new offensive coordinator, they trade up to get Malik Willis. Then some players go up the board. Chris Olave was somebody I looked to trade up for. He was somebody that I didn't expect to fall to 25, but he's somebody that, I really, really wanted to. I could not find a deal with the Buffalo Bills. It was really, really hard to, and I was afraid that he was going to go with this 25th overall pick. I tried to trade up, but I didn't want to give up too many assets high in the draft, and I didn't want to give up too many assets next year either to move up for a good wide receiver when this wide receiver class was really deep in general. But he was a target going down into the late 20s that if it happens in real life, I think you could see the Lions try to get him as well. Upgrade the defensive line early. Devontae Wyatt was somebody I was looking at, but obviously, of course, went 1 pick before I was able to get him. Daxton Hill, the safety from Michigan, is somebody that a lot of people like. You have Lewis Klein, a safety that a lot of people are a fan of. Drake Jackson was a target as well. It was really between him and Arnold Ibiketti for that edge rusher position. David Bell was a big target. Fidarian Mathis was a big target. You have Christian Harris was a big target for a lot of people. Zion Johnson for sure was a target. George Pickens was the one wide receiver that I wanted that just couldn't quite fall far enough. Desmond Ritter's a Falcon. But I think this mock draft for the Detroit Lions is good. I think it upgrades at all the positions that they needed to upgrade at. There's one more look at the trade recap. I think it gives the Lions more of an opportunity to upgrade and build depth at a lot of different positions. I think you walk away from this draft class with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 major starters long term, and then obviously you have you have this depth tight end that could step up big for a long time and be kind of that backup complement to TJ Hawkinson. You have some offensive linemen that can step up big. Taylor Decker, once he eventually leaves, Myron Cunningham might be able to step up into that starting role. If Big V eventually leaves, Nick Ford can step into that role and be really good. So potential long-term starters there, long-term projects. But overall, just really, really good. So that's really all the Lions stuff that I wanted to talk about today. That's all we really got, unless there are some other people or there's some other topics that you guys wanted to touch on as Detroit Lions fans. So I want to move over to the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl is tonight. The Super Bowl is coming up. You can see that for Super Bowl Sunday, you got to rock the Super Bowl jersey. Makes too much sense. Was just looking me in the eyes when I was trying to get ready this morning, and that's the jersey that we ended up picking. But when you look at the Super Bowl matchups, I really, really think that the Rams are going to walk away from this game as the victors. And I don't think the Rams are, or I don't think the Bengals are bad per se. I just think that, and I want to see, well, I'll just explain it then, because I think the Rams are going to win this game. And I'm not being biased towards Matthew Stafford. I really, really think that the Rams are the better overall team when it comes to the Super Bowl. Now, the Los Angeles Rams are 15-5 on the season, and the Bengals are 13-7. The Los Angeles Rams, I think, are built to win now, whereas the Bengals, I think, are built to win for a very, very long time. But I think with them having such a young team, with Joe Burrow only being in his second season, with Jamar Chase being a rookie, with their wide receiver core being incredibly young, and frankly, their offensive line not being any good, kind of actually sucks, I just think Joe Burrow will be under too much pressure to win this Super Bowl. Now, I think Joe Burrow is good enough to win it, and I think the Bengals are good enough to win this Super Bowl. And last year, I was very, very wrong when it came to the Super Bowl. I had the Chiefs winning. I had Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense being just too much for the Bucs, and that very clearly was not the case. But I think a similar thing about the Rams. The Rams have Aaron Donald. They have Von Miller rushing the passer. Von Miller is in prime 2016 Von Miller 13.5, 20 sack season type of form in the playoffs. Aaron Donald is being Aaron Donald, and he is going right through some of the best offensive lines that the league has to offer, and Cincinnati is far from that. Jalen Ramsey is the best cornerback that the Bengals have played all season. Nobody's been able to guard Jamar Chase in the playoffs, but Jamar Chase has played the Raiders secondary, the Titans secondary, and the Chiefs secondary. There has not been an elite cornerback on any one of those teams, whereas Jalen Ramsey has defended Mike Evans. Jalen Ramsey has defended the Cardinals. Jalen Ramsey defended the Deebo Samuel. He has had more tough matchups, and even in the past, he has shadowed Devontae Adams. He locked down locked down Justin Jefferson. He shuts down opposing wide receivers. He is the best cornerback in the game, and he is the best cornerback that Jamar Chase has ever played against. And I think Jalen Ramsey's experience is going to get the better of Jamar Chase in this game. Not that I don't think Jamar Chase will win a couple reps. He'll probably have, I would say, 3 to 4 catches, maybe 70, 80 yards. I think it's going to be one of Jalen Ramsey's tougher opportunities this season. But I think Jalen Ramsey's experience, his veteran presence, and just overall the Rams' pressure will get to Joe Burrow too quickly. I think Jalen Ramsey will force Joe Burrow to go to that second and third read. And by the time Joe Burrow gets to that second and third read, Aaron Donald's going to be in his face. And Von Miller's going to be behind him stripping the ball out for a forced fumble. I just think the Rams are too talented on the defensive side of the ball for the Bengals offensive line to hold up. And I know that the Bengals all season have, defied these odds, and that they've, despite the poor offensive line play, they have, just out-talented people with their wide receiving core and with, all these talented guys on the boundary and with Joe Mixon. But the Bengals are yet to play Aaron Donald. The Bengals are yet to play Von Miller. And I don't remember their schedule exactly, but, they played in the Raiders and the Vikings, who never had an elite pass rush or an elite cornerback. The Bears didn't have an elite pass rush. The Steelers did. They beat the Steelers, but the Steelers didn't have an elite cornerback pass rushing duo. The Jags definitely didn't. The Packers did not. The Lions certainly did not. The Ravens did not. The Jets didn't. The Browns had a really good cornerback and a really, really good edge rusher, and they got kind of smoked by the Browns, right? They have Denzel Ward against Jamar Chase. They followed, they shadowed him, and then they had Myles Garrett taking advantage of a poor defensive line from the Bengals, and I think that's a similar way you could see it from that angle. They beat the Raiders pretty handedly, who have Max Crosby, but not a great corner. Again, they thrashed the Steelers, but they don't have a great corner. The Chargers have a really good corner, or I guess a really good secondary in general, and a really good edge rusher. The Niners have a good secondary and a great pass rush. The Broncos have a decent team. They held the Bengals to 15. The Ravens were heavily injured at this point, playing with like third string defense. The Chiefs don't have anybody at corner. The Browns, again, have a great edge rusher and a great cornerback. They beat the Bengals twice. And then the Raiders don't have a great secondary or a great pass rush. The Tennessee Titans sacked Burrow 9 times, and the only reason they won that game was because their defense forced 3 turnovers, which I don't think happens from Matthew Stafford. And then the Chiefs, again, they don't really have anybody. Bengals are an offensive juggernaut. They're going to be really hard to stop. Saying that Stafford is coming to play, and that's just not Detroit talk, that's real talk. I mean, I'm just looking at it more from the defensive perspective of the Los Angeles Rams, right? You look at the teams that the Bengals lost to this season. They lost to the Packers, who are more of an offensive-driven team. And this is, I think, before the Bengals really found their stride. Then they went on a winning streak. They lost to the Jets, which happens. They lost to the Browns, which I think is the big one, because the Browns are the first team that they lost to have an elite pass rush. When they had the Smith brothers, they were really good against the Packers. When the Packers had the Smith brothers rushing opposing quarterbacks, they were really good, and they stopped the Bengals. The Jets, I don't know what happened. That was a fluky game. But the Browns had a great pass rush and a good secondary. They beat the Bengals. The 49ers had a really good pass rush, and they were able to stop Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Chargers had a really good pass rush and were able to neutralize the Bengals. The Browns, again, did the exact same thing. I don't think the Rams are playing to their potential so far in the playoffs, but I think they're going to leave it all on the field for the Super Bowl. It's going to be enough for the going to be enough. Yeah, and I think the Rams just out-talent the Bengals. Eli Apple is not covering Cooper Kupp. Chidobe Awuzie is not covering Odell Beckham Jr. for the entire game. It just simply will not happen. And I think that those wide receivers are going to have phenomenal games. I think that, Matthew Stafford is going to look really good in this Super Bowl. And then I think that the edge rushers, especially Von Miller and especially Aaron Donald up the center, are going to just have probably the best Super Bowl ever. I mean, I would not be surprised if the Rams walk away from this game with 7, 8 sacks. I wouldn't be surprised if the Los Angeles Rams have a similar game like the Tennessee Titans did on defense, getting, 9 sacks on Joe Burrow in this game alone. If there is defensive, there's sacks. Jeffrey Simmons, a really good interior defensive lineman, got 3 sacks. David Long got a sack. Harold Landry got a sack and a half. This is your Von Miller and Aaron Donald. This is a less talented duo. But if this guy, Jeffrey Simmons, who granted I think is a top 10 defensive tackle in the game, if he can get 3 sacks against this line, and if Harold Landry, somebody who is not Von Miller, and Bud Dupree, who is kind of age past his prime, if they can each get a sack to a sack and a half, what is Aaron Donald going to do? What is Von Miller going to do to this offensive line, right? Danico Autry got a sack and a half. He would not start on the Rams. All of these guys got half sacks, which, I mean, they probably got theirs together. They got 9 sacks on the Bengals, and the only reason that they lost is because Ryan Tannehill threw 3 interceptions. Matthew Stafford does not throw 3 interceptions with Cooper Kupp. I don't even know if Matthew Stafford has thrown 3 interceptions in a game this season. We're going to go look. Matthew Stafford this year for the Rams has thrown 3 interceptions once, and it was against Minnesota, where they still won, by the way. But he did it once. Everywhere else, yeah, you have 2-2 against, some good teams, but they still won those games. And then you have one, and Stafford is not going to turn the ball over. And then when you look at his playoff success, if we can find it, if we go up here to game logs 2021. It's not going to show it. Of course not. Game logs. Oh, postseason. There we go. If we go to postseason this year, he's 2-0 for touchdown interceptions. He is 2-0 touchdown interception versus Tampa Bay, and he is 2-1 versus the San Francisco 49ers. I agree with Tony. I think the Bengals are still a couple drafts away from being elite. They're really good right now, and they're very young right now, and they will be consistent playoff contenders for many years to come. But I think they need a draft to address the offensive line before they can really, truly contend with the Rams. And I think it's going to be close. I by no means think it's going to be a blowout. I just think the Rams pass rush is going to be too much for the Bengals offensive line. But the Bengals path to the Super Bowl. But what is the Bengals? The Bengals path is to neutralize one of the edge rushers, right? If you can shut down Aaron Donald or Von Miller or both, right? Obviously, your ideal is you can double Aaron Donald and your tackle can hold up versus Von Miller. But the big path to the Bengals victory is Jamar Chase has to get the best of Jalen Ramsey 3 to 4 times. If Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow can connect on a few deep passes, I think they can win this game. If Jamar Chase can consistently get the best of Jalen Ramsey, which very few players ever do, but if Jamar Chase can do it, if he can get open against the best cornerback in the league, the Bengals are going to have a chance to put up points and win this game. If this game turns to a shootout, I think the Rams will win it. If the Bengals defense can stand up, if their cornerbacks can, just make Stafford frustrated, and Jamar Chase can beat Jalen Ramsey a couple different times, I think that the Bengals can win this game. Their path is a shootout, but against Stafford, it's going to be a good one. Hopefully we get to see that in the Super Bowl. Hopefully. And I hope this game is a close one. I hope this game, is a 30, 40-point game. I hope it is a shootout. I hope it is a, high-scoring game with a lot of big plays. Ideally, we get the Chiefs-Rams Monday night game from 2018, where it was 100 combined points, 1,000 combined yards. Ideally, that's what you get with a lot of defensive plays, a lot of offensive plays, a lot of points, and just one of the best games of NFL history, to be totally honest. But I think this game is set up to be a good one. These teams, I think, play to each other's strengths, right? I think the Rams take advantage of the Bengals' poor offensive line, and I think the Rams take advantage of the Bengals' poor secondary, or at least at corner, the poor secondaries in the cornerback room. And I think that they take advantage when it comes to shutting down their number one weapon. But the Rams' secondary as a whole has struggled this season, where the Bengals are incredibly deep there. The Bengals' offense in Joe Burrow, I think, is maybe the best quarterback. Well, not the best quarterback, but second best quarterback they've seen in the playoffs, and one of the better quarterbacks they've seen all year. And at the end of the day this season, I've learned a lesson that it is not smart to bet against Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is a really good player, and despite what the odds might say, despite what the stat sheet might say, despite what on paper the rosters are going to look like, you should never, ever bet against Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow is that guy. Joe Burrow is good enough to win you football games. right? And the Titans shut him down. They got pressure on Joe Burrow a lot. And yeah, he had, 348 yards on 37 attempts. That's like 10 yards an attempt. That's not that high. 1 interception, 0 touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 100 yards. But if you can get consistent pressure on Joe Burrow, that's how you beat the Bengals. And that's very frankly what the Rams do. They get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, right? I mean, they have Aaron Donald. They have Von Miller. They have, let's see, the Rams depth. That's not how you spell depth. The depth chart. They have a lot of defensive linemen, right? You have Ashawn Robinson. You have Aaron Donald. You have Leonard Floyd. You have Von Miller. You have Sebastian Joseph Day, who's played really well. Ogun, I won't even do it. Oh, too much. But, they have these pass rushers. And a secondary with Darius Williams, who is by no means a bad cornerback, Jalen Ramsey, Eric Weddle, and Taylor Rapp. That's a good enough secondary, I think, to bottle up the Bengals receiving core for a long time, or at least for a majority of the game. And then you have on the offensive side of the ball, Van Jefferson, Odell Beckham, and Cooper Kupp. Both these quarterbacks are gunslingers. That is what Detroit Lions had and need at a starting quarterback. I don't disagree. I'm kind of upset that they no longer have Matthew Stafford, but I'm glad Matthew Stafford's playing for a Super Bowl. But at this point, I think the Rams are just better. I think their defensive line is going to be too much for the Bengals offense. Not that they won't put up points, but I think at the end of the day, the defensive line will be a little bit too much. And with the Bengals secondary consisting of Eli Apple and Chidobe Awuzie, they are not going to be able to double Kupp and Stafford, or they're not going to be able to double Kupp and Beckham. And if they double Kupp, then Beckham's going to be open. If they double Beckham, then you're one-on-one with Cooper Kupp. And if you try to double both, well, Van Jefferson has snuck behind the defense a lot this season for a lot of big plays and a lot of touchdowns. I think the Lions. I think the Rams will win this football game. And I think that Stafford will get his first Super Bowl ring tonight. So with that being said, though, I think that is all we have time for today. Just wanted a little bit of a quick stream talk about the Lions and then talk about the Super Bowl. So all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And hopefully you guys enjoyed the Super Bowl tonight. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, what your Super Bowl score predictions are, and why you think the team is going to win that you think will do so. But with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions. Thank you all.